As we talk about the God's glory in the light of covenant relationship, or in covenant relationship, we talk about God's glory. This brings us to a place where Moses, right? Moses now second time actually encounters God, meets God on the same mountain, in the same mountain of Mount of Horeb, Mount of Sinai, right? You find this story in Exodus 19. Exodus 19. All right. So let me just go there, and if you have the Bible with me, I'm going to read the first few verses in Exodus 19, and then set the stage on what is happening right now over here, and then we will just talk on the God's glory later. All right, if you have Bible with you, Exodus 19, verse 1 through, I'm reading. I'm reading from CEB. On exactly the third month anniversary of the Israelites leaving the land of Egypt, they came into the Sinai desert. They traveled from Rephidim, came into the Sinai desert, and set up camp there. Israel camped there in front of the mountain, while Moses went up to God. The Lord called him from the mountains. This is what you should say to Jacob's household, and declare to the Israelites, you saw what I did to the Egyptians, and how I lifted you up on eagle's wings and brought you to me. So now if you faithfully obey me and stay true to my covenant, you will be my most precious possession out of all the people. Since the whole earth belongs to me, you will be a kingdom of priests for me and a holy nation. These are the words you should say to the Israelites. Now, God himself speaks to Moses, and he asks Israeli people to keep his covenant, all right, to keep my covenant, keep his covenant. He's very clear, like now he is not talking about covenant, but then he asks to keep his covenant. Even before the law, the covenant comes, the relationship comes, even before God actually ask Israelite to do this and that by giving all the laws, right? So he asks to keep them the law, the covenant that God had made with Abraham, right? In Abraham. Now you see from Abraham's generation, what has happened from Abraham, the time of Abraham. Abraham in Genesis, you see like God makes a covenant with Abraham, saying that I will bless you and I'll make you a blessing to the nations. And then that goes on, Abraham's son Isaac. God reminds Isaac as well about his covenant. And then it goes to Jacob and Esau. A beautiful story, Jacob and Esau. Jacob wrestles with God. Jacob has all this like turmoil story, right? All this like messed up life. He had to labor in his father-in-law's house for 14 years. 14 years. Rachel and the other woman. Who was that? Leah, right? Funny story as well. Like Jacob, did not recognize that he was with Rachel in the night. It's just so funny. I don't know what kind of world they were living there on those times. Jacob and Joseph, Jacob and Esau. Now from Jacob comes Joseph, right? The story of Joseph. Joseph was sold to Egypt, and that's where now Israelites begin to flourish and then like multiply, right? And when you read Exodus 1, there's this story like a new king arise. A new king came in the land of Egypt who did not know Joseph, what he did, and who was Joseph, right? And because of that, now this new king begin to actually torture, begin to be unjust to the Israeli people. And he actually makes them their slaves to work on the mortars, like to actually he really actually tortures them with lots of heavy works, and the Israelites begin to cry out in their prayers to ask God to help them, to rescue them. And now when you know the story of like when Moses actually was, now God chose Moses. Like what happens now? God actually sends Moses back to Egypt, right, to rescue his people. And then that's where the story of Exodus begins, after Moses goes back to his people And then after 9 plagues, right, he rescues people. He gives the Passover festival and all of that. And then what happens? Now Moses is leading Israelite to the same mountain where he had actually encountered God, to the same experience that he had before. And it's very important. I'm going to come back to that. It is very, very, very key for us to look at. Now pause in this moment and then just see what is happening right now. All right? 3 months has passed. The 3 months has passed. Now they have crossed the Red Sea. You remember the story, Red Sea crossing, right? Red Sea, and then with all this turmoil. And God has been faithful to them. Sojourner, like we were talking about in the covenant relationship, God had been the king, provider, protector, a father who is fathering them. Now, just before Exodus 19, God has been really like taking care of Israelites. Regardless their grumblings, right? They ask for meat. God provides them manna. God provides them quail, right? The birds. They ask for food. God provides them with manna, right? Every day, God provides them. And they were thirsty in the desert. They might have had no experience living in a desert condition, right? So they were thirsty and grumbling against Moses, and God provides them with the water gushing out of the rock, right? So now what you see is that, and not only that, but then Amalekites, they attack Israelites just before chapter 19. But God, through Moses and Joshua, now they gains a big victory, right? Because God was walking with them. I'm gonna read this passage. It's so powerful that God was with them in Exodus 13:21. It says that by the day the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Can you imagine that this God is actually walking with Israelites? His dwelling is with them. His glory is with them, right? By night and by day, providing them, like food, water, shelter, protection. And now just like God is really actually, is so evidently He's present with them. Right now you see that. But in Mount Sinai, what happens is that is this same God who comes in His glory. It's a different kind of glory. The same God, right, who's dwelling and walking with these guys, protecting them. But now what you see in Mount Sinai is God is actually revealing His glory, His grandeur, His majesty. And man, it's just so terrifying. When the Hebrew or the people talk about it in Bible, they couldn't even imagine how there is a word in Hindi like Bayanak, right, or Nepali, how terrible it was, the sight. Moses couldn't even think about it. He was trembling in fear, right, trembling in fear. I mean, I can think of this glory of God just descending in the mountain. And I'm just thinking and asking this question. So when was the last time did I have that kind of same experience with God? Right? When did we have that experience with God? That we were trembling in fear to come before God and in His presence, right? When do you feel that you are just worthless? Utterly you felt like you're nothing before Him, right? Versus how casual we are. How casual we are these days. It just doesn't matter. Okay, all right, God just forgives. He's a gracious God, right? I'm just speaking that out because then we have become so casual in the sense that when we talk about the glory and presence of God. Now, it is very key. It is very important for us as Christians, when we talk about our relationship, covenant relationship with God, we need to see, experience, feel the presence, the glory of God in our lives. And then, in our covenant relationship, when we ask why I have this relationship with God, when we ask these questions, the answer is that the purpose of a relationship with God is to glorify His name. Is glorify His name, to pivot His name, to exalt His name, and to make known His name to all the people, to the nations. All right? To be a channel of blessing, what does that mean? It is that really to spread the glory of God in the nations, to really allow people to experience the same glory of God in their lives as well. Now, I really want us to think about this sight where Moses actually sights God in His glory. Now, what is happening in chapter 19 really allows you to see God in His glory. Now, when I was reading, when you read chapter 19, what do you see? What does it look like, the glory of God? What does it look like? Can you just like throw some answers? We have not read until the later verses, but then what do you see? Powerful. God is very powerful. What can you picture? What do you see there? Thunder, lightning. Thunder, lightning. Big cloud. Trumpets. Lightnings, right? Smoke. Yes. All right, 16. When morning dawned on the third day, there was thunder, lightning, and a thick cloud on the mountain, and a very loud blast of horn. All the people in the camp shook with fear. Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet God, and they took their place at the foot of the mountain. Mount Sinai was all in smoke because the Lord had come down on it with lightning. The smoke went up like the smoke of a hot furnace, while the whole mountain shook violently. The blasts of the horn grew louder and louder. Moses would speak, and God would answer him with thunder. The Lord come down on Mount Sinai to the top of the mountain. The Lord called Moses to come up to the top of the mountain, and Moses went up. The Lord said to Moses, "Go down and warn the people not to break through to try to see the Lord, or many of them will fall dead. Even the priests who come near to the Lord must keep themselves holy, or the Lord will break loose against them." Man, this side, when Moses was, now when you actually look at it, it's very terrifying. It's very terrifying. God actually now comes in his power, in his glory. You see that, right? And one of the things that God does is that he puts a limit around it so that no one actually can, apart from Moses, the priest, Aaron later, right? So they would not enter into his presence. So he intentionally puts around a fence around it so that least they will be consumed by his presence. All right? So there is this in the presence, in the glory of God, there is this kind of like the reverence, the fear that comes out of it. The holy fear of God comes out of it, that you should not take the presence, the glory of God lightly in your lives. It is sacred. It is sacred. Man, the glory of God is sacred. You know how we know that is because also like God says that even with the priest, and then now he goes on to say that they should not also have any sexual impurities as well, right? So you can see that we know that the sexual relationship is one of the most sacred thing. It's a gift that God has given to the humanity, to us. Now even God is saying that okay, they should not approach a woman, or you should abstain from sexual impurities. What does that mean? It says that it really shows that God's presence is above all the sacredness. It is the most holiest thing that God has given to us. That therefore we should not just tremble with fear, but we should rever it. It's a place that where a jealous God dwells, a God with his consuming fire. Therefore, God puts a limit so that they will be consumed when they come casually into the presence of God. Man, I think this image, this picture really reminds me of the picture of like Isaiah also encountering God in his holiness, in his presence. When you open Bible in Isaiah chapter 6, you will see that, in the year of Uzziah king died, Isaiah sees God in his holiness. No, the word says that his robe filled the temple, the whole temple. It doesn't say his body, his robe, just the robe filled the whole temple. And it describes about the same kind of smoke and all of that. I think there are a lot of smoke in the presence of God. So there's a lot of smoke coming out of it, And then the fire, the cherubim, the seraphim, like the angels could not see him so that they could hide themselves All right, their face, they could hide their face, right? And then he really talks about then with this experience of like God's glory, he says like, oh no, I'm consumed. I live amongst the sinful people. I am a sinful person, right? He, I think, wished that, oh, I shouldn't be here in this place. I shouldn't be here in this place, right? And then at that moment, you see that the word comes out that the whole earth is filled with His glory again, right? And then similarly in New Testament, what happens? Peter, James, John, when they actually go up on the mountain in Matthew 17, you see that now Jesus He has now appeared in His glory, right? Do you remember like what happens? The word that has been provided to describe His glory, His face shines like a sun, right? His face is like shining with the brilliance of light, the sunlight, right? Now you can imagine, but one of the things that comes out to me is that these guys, they weren't able to be in the presence, in the glory of God, but now Peter, James, and John, they are allowed to be in the presence of God with Jesus, right? With Jesus, they're experiencing the glory of God in the same mountain. And then they were really like enjoying. Perhaps they were enjoying. They didn't want to go back to the world where there was a lot of things happening, chaos unfolding, like things happening, right? Now, what I want us to picture right now is just that many times we forget that we should dwell, or that we worship that glorious God in our lives. Many times we need to be reminded as Christians that we worship that glorious God, the glorious God who fashioned the whole universe. And you know, man, I mean, like, it is interesting to see that the glory of God has appeared to His people time and time again in that particular place or time when in the history of humanity, or especially history of the Bible, they have encountered problems in their lives. They have been going through this chaos, right? They have now this uncertainty that they have to face. You know what? Isaiah chapter 6, what that shows, the year King Uzziah died, the Israelites were going on nuts, right? They didn't know what to do next, right? Now, finally, a good king was here, but now he has also died. We don't know what to do now. And God appears in His glory, right? There is turmoil happening in the world in the New Testament, right? People were just asking, can you please heal my son? These guys, they had no power. They couldn't heal, right? So people were quarreling and fighting. And then Peter, James, and John, they're experiencing the glory of God with Jesus, right? And now what you see here is that the interesting thing that even with Israelites, as they begin their journey, as they were about to begin their journey through the desert, right? They might have had no experience to really go through this desert life. They are just beginning this life. And how much they need to go, how many years they have to go? Can I reveal my wife's year? We can reveal 40 years, right? 40 years. She still looks beautiful. Beautiful and charming. Very young, very energetic, giving birth still. So we are praise God. So, but man, we were talking about like, yeah, what happens 40 years next? We just traveled 40 years. Wow, it's a long time. Imagine these guys, Israelites, now they are about to begin the journey, this harshest condition in the desert life. They will face many problems in the days ahead. They will face many enemies, right? They will go through times that, they have to face these vipers in the desert. So many things would happen. And in fact, the generations will actually die in the desert until they would reach the promised land in Canaan, right? What has happened right now? It is very significant that God actually comes to them in His glory. It is very, very significant that this place where God reveals His glory to them actually now appears right at the beginning of their journey in their lives. It is so key for us to be reminded, but at the same time, to be driven by the glory of God in our lives. And to live for the glory of God in our lives. Does that make sense to you? Right? It is so key for us to be driven, whether in your ministry, in your workplace. We talked about workplace. We talked about our personal health and personal lives, our relationship with God and with others last week. And in many of our ambitions, many of our hopes and our aspirations and all of that. It is very key. I felt it is so key for us to really to be driven by the glory of God and to live for the glory of God. All right? It is very important. And how do we do that? How do we do it? When we ask this question, how do we do that? Is by really seeing and experiencing and feeling that glory and by being present in the glory of God in our lives. It is so important in our lives. Or else, if we are not seeing the glory of God, we might be seeing our own glory. We might be driven by our own glory. We might be pursuing after the glory of something else in our lives. It is so key for us. And I wanted to pray this prayer for all of us as a church. That at this point of time, that where are you in this journey? Where are you in this journey? Are you seeing the glory of God in your lives? Are you asking these questions that, am I really living for the glory of God in my life? I was asking these questions to myself, like this expansion happening, but does it really glorify God? Man, I was asking these questions. I have my family just growing up here in Hong Kong, but am I really pursuing the glory of God in this ministry? People have come to know the Lord. Yes, we have beautiful testimonies. Yes, I have seen drug addicts come to life. Now the ministry has begun. I have seen families give their lives to Christ. Now I am seeing this transformation. But am I really living for the glory of God? Are these all pursuing the glory of God? And thank God that Bajana also reminded that God, the commission has been given to us. It's not a limited commission for only for missionaries, for all of us, right? Every one of us, that God asks us to live for His glory. And we need to ask this serious question to ourselves today, that am I really living for the glory of God? What is the glory of God for you today? Am I really living or driven? Am I really driven or live for the glory of God? Not the halfway through the message. I'm going to stop here right now. Next week, if you come back, I will continue on talking about what steals the glory of God. Now, just right after this chapter, God gives law to Moses, right? And in the first passage, what do you see? What is the law that God was actually revealing to the Israelites? All right, He talks about do not worship an idol. Do not You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven, above or on the earth, beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, I am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not, can you say have, make, and worship, right? You shall not have, make, and worship. What does that mean? Have, make, and worship. Why? It's the only thing. Like God is just asking, do not worship idol, right? I was just thinking about that all the time. But no, God says, do not have, do not make, do not worship. What does that mean? What could that mean? I was thinking about small idols that we have personalized in our own lives, our personal idols, right? Or making is something that is beyond our personal items. Like it's kind of like it talks about a business. It talks about like effort that you put into, right? Like it goes beyond your personal life, a social kind of like a relationship. And then the third one is just that you don't worship. It really talks about the institutionalized version of idolatry, right? And that's what you see in the lives of Israelites, that they did not only just have their personal idols they had to struggle with, but then they begin to make idols, right? They begin to copy other people's ways in their lives, and they begin to worship other gods. And then they institutionalized. By the time the last king, Josiah, what do you see? In the temple, they have already erected the temple, like the other temples, the Baals and all of that, had already now entranced. And they were worshiping alongside God, other gods as well. You have seen that nationwide, they're worshiping idols. But now, in the ancient times, they were worshiping these idols. But what could that mean for us today? What would that mean for us? I know that pathway leaders are here, and I know for sure, when you ask them, they will just like tell you, what are your idols like? How many of you are like going through pathway leadership training course? Can you please raise your hands, please? Yeah. All right. It's beautiful. What is idolatry? Idolatry is making something or someone other than Jesus Christ our ultimate source of happiness or fulfillment. Right? That's idolatry in our lives. Idolatry is making something or someone other than Jesus Christ our ultimate source of happiness or fulfillment. It is challenging, but then what really it is saying is that when we put something else in our lives, when we prioritize something else more than God in our lives, and that becomes a source of happiness and joy. When it is taken from you, then you are not happy. You are ill, you are sick, right? You want to pursue it so much so that everything you put your effort into it to gain, to have that in your lives. And that's what Tim Keller is saying essentially, like whatever we ultimately live for has great power over us. If someone blocks our idol from us, we can be enraged with anger, I do that sometime. Like if my opinion is not heard, or he or she does not listen to me, and then I become like so enraged, like, why don't you not listen to me? My voice, kind of that thing. This is my way of cooking this way. Like you should cook this way. Tufina, you should cook this way. This is all rubbish. I'm not gonna eat it. No, I'm not that harsh, but then the way I just say it, like, okay, I'll just try. It's the same thing, saying like, I'm not gonna participate in this. All right. My idols are some of those things as well. So that's what I'm trying to say. We can be enraged with anger if our idols are threatened. It's too much like now personal. Like no, you have made it with your hands, and now so somebody is coming and trying to steal that, right? Trying to teach you how to do Zoom. I'm like, I have mastered this Zoom, and I know how to do it. Like, please go away. I'm just kidding. I'm just taking all those examples, fun examples. We can be paralyzed with fear. Have you seen people being paralyzed with like fear and anger when they're so angry? I'm seeing them shaking. I've seen people shake with anger. That much of anger. The fear as well. Fear cripples us, right? And anger at the same time. If we lose our idol, we can be driven into utter despair. Tim Keller. Ezekiel 36:25-27. I will sprinkle clean water on you, and you will be clean. I will cleanse you from all your impurities and from all your idols. Praise the Lord. And from all your idols, I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit in you. I will remove from you your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees and be careful to keep my laws. Man, this is so powerful. And it really talks about the very person of Jesus Christ who does this in our lives. And through whom we have we can overcome and be victorious in these idols in our lives. Right? He allows us, he removes these idols from us. Now, when I say remove, I mean like I just keep on doing all of these things, bad things before God, and now Jesus, can you just take it away? That does not happen that way. What it is saying is that when we surrender our lives to Jesus, when we come to him by faith and believe him as our personal Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, what he does? He does a beautiful thing of renewing that covenant relationship with us and with God. He takes us. He takes those idols for himself. And we know that Jesus Christ has died on the cross. Why? Because of our idols. Because of our sinfulness. Essentially, he rose again from from defeating those idols and rose again for the victory, the victorious life. And actually, Jesus, by us, us having relationship with Jesus, there is this power in our relationship, that covenant that we have now with Jesus. There is this power that now Jesus not only allows or enables us to see these idols in our lives, but then he actually helps us overcome those idols in our lives. He actually, I would say, he actually gets to the root of those idols. And even before those idols take place in our lives, take foothold in our lives, he actually takes away those idols from our lives. How? How does that happen? In Matthew, he talks about this thing. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Man, Jesus talks about the root of all problems, right? He wants to get into the source. He talks about idolatry. That could be a very generic. Could be a very a generic in a sense murdering or adultery and all of that. Okay, I don't have those things. I have not done those things. But then, when Jesus talks about the eye, where does the temptation begins? Does it begin from the temptation of lust, for example, a sexual sin? Where does it begin, from mind, or from body? From where? I don't know. In my experience, it starts from the eye, right? Right, so it begins from eye, and when we look at something that I should not be looking at, it begins from eye, right? And it just sinks into the heart and mind and all of that. So Jesus really talks about keeping our eye, or having that light in our eye, so that what we see actually that sinks into our hearts, and therefore he wants us to see the light himself, right? Himself, his word in our lives. Now, I will show you this passage where Job says, 31:1, I made a covenant with my eyes not to look lustfully at a young woman. Lustfully looking at a woman could be a problem for men, but it could be a problem for women as well, right? Anyone's problem. Now, I'm taking this as an example that how Jesus actually then addresses the root cause of the issue, the idolatry, right? And now you see that Job actually is intentionally asking, himself. He's actually making a covenant with his eyes so that he would not see, he would not look at a woman with lustful eyes. Now, this gives us an example to go a little bit more deeper than just talking about the idols in our lives. Because then, as I was talking about in context of the relationship, when we have relationship with Jesus, then actually he allows us to see what is wrong underneath. And not just that, but then he helps us, keeps us from, again, having those idols or accumulating those idols in our lives by actually making a covenant, by giving those, whatever it is, whether the body, whether our thought life, whatever it is, to himself. And I think that's what it means to have a covenant with God in a holistic manner, right? We talked about last week, Pastor Wade and Erica were talking about, we have those traumas, pains and hurts and all of that. And then how can we treat our bodies? How can you actually then allow healing for your bodies? She was talking about all of that, and sometimes we should not just go and forgive and all of that. So they were talking about this emotional health and all of that. But now, as you talk, as we come back and see in light of Jesus and our relationship with Jesus, he actually allows us to make a covenant with our bodies so that we will not go further rupturing this relationship with God and harm ourselves as well. I want to conclude with this one. That today, what does it mean to see the glory of God in our relationship? It means that we have made covenant with God, but we have made covenant with ourselves as well. What it is actually taking you to sin or bow before the idols of your own weaknesses. What is it that is causing you to fall? What is it that is causing you to break away from that relationship in your life? The answer is simple, that God wants us to make a covenant that we may not do this, we may not do that. And actually, Jesus helps us and allows us to walk on that path of making those covenants in our lives. And I want us to put the bars around us so that we are protected in our covenant relationship with God. We are not just protected, but then we then can enjoy the presence of God in our lives. Hebrew last word, mountain of joy. You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and that is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned to death. The sight was terrifying that Moses said, I am trembling with fear. But you have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly. God has brought us on that mountain where there is so much joy. And man, when we have learned to make a covenant with our bodies, with our lives, in such a way that it is so that we are in a covenant relationship with God, and that actually leads us to enter into a joyful assembly or into a joyful mountain with God, to experience that. And out of that mountain, you'll be operating your lives. I don't know what is your mountain today, where you are standing. Are you standing in the mountain of joy? Are you operating from the mountain of joy or insecurity, fear, right? God is calling us to be in that mountain again, where there is so much joy and freedom.